Was training to join the military, and in that training period of joining the military, I was walking the Milford Track. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. It's a beautiful 54-kilometre trek, and you walk for 3 days, and I was going on this walk. And on this walk, on the first day, I walked into the river and stepped into the river and stepped up onto a small rock, just this large. And I put my foot on the top of this rock and I stepped on the rock, and there was moss and slime on the rock, and my leg twisted and snapped. I broke both bones in this leg. Okay, broke both bones in this leg just by stepping onto the rock. My leg broke, and the leg was forced into the ground and came out the other side of the ankle, and I needed to be rescued by helicopter and flown to a hospital, and they fixed up my leg. And that night on the news, on the television, there was a picture of me being lifted into the helicopter, and it said, "Another Australian has broken his leg on the Milford Track." That was what was said. And so I'm in hospital by myself, leg in a plaster, waiting. Had an operation. I had 6 screws in this leg and a plate to hold it together, and I received all these cards that were, "Oh, hope you get better soon, Pastor Ralph, we're praying for you." But then they told me why I broke my leg. They started to write and tell me. And so some told me that I had hidden sin in my life, and that's why I broke my leg. Some told me that my family used to be Masons in the past, and that's why I broke my leg, which isn't true, but they felt that was the reason. Some said that God wanted me to slow down. I was moving too fast, I need to slow down. Some said that there was a demon in the river that was going to jump up and bit my leg, and that's what happened. And I think there were several other reasons that people told me why I broke my leg. But there was nothing very helpful with any of those. It didn't help me at all, because I was just left with a broken leg and a support. And it felt like that. I did not feel like I had any support. So I flew home to Australia the week later, and I preached in my church. And I sat on a stool because I couldn't stand up because I was on crutches. So I sat on a stool and I preached a message. And the message title was, "Why did Pastor Ralph break his leg?" I taught on suffering, and I taught on how to talk to people in trauma and the things I'd learned from that. And can I say, there are so many things you shouldn't say. Now, you have picked up on a great list. This is a great list. The truth is, you don't know how they feel. The truth is, the same thing has not happened to you. The truth is, they do have to be strong, but it's not helpful to just tell them they have to be strong. What you should tell them is something different, and we'll talk about that. A lot of people, especially if they're coming from a Christian perspective, will use scriptures in a way that is actually almost like a sword that cuts in an unhelpful way. So they'll say things like, and the scripture is true and powerful, it's wonderful, but they'll say things like, "All things work together for good." Okay? And it's true, but at the moment where you have lost a loved one, that is maybe not the thing you need to hear. I was in a funeral after a tragic accident, and I was not conducting the funeral, but another partner was conducting the funeral, and a 16-year-old girl had been killed after falling out of the back of a car. And yes, they were being foolish as young children, young people, and it was a terrible accident, but the tragedy was that she had fallen out of the car, she hit her head and she died. And it was very sad. Now, the family were Christian family, and they decided that they would want to give an opportunity at the funeral for people to hear the good news of Jesus. And I want to say the pastor did a beautiful job. It was a beautiful job. Just shared, beautiful, compassionate funeral. It was lovely. And at the end of the message, he just gave an opportunity for people, if they would like to have a relationship with Jesus, to respond. And that was, again, beautiful. And two young women in the front row from this young girl's class put their hand up and said, yes, I'd like to give my life to Jesus, which is a great thing. No problem. No problem at all. But at the end of the funeral, I was standing in the line to speak to the mother. And the person in front of me said to the mother, see, God used your daughter's death for something really good today, didn't he? Now, I can hear from the way you sucked in air, and you can feel how bad that was to say that. So we have to be incredibly careful. Think of how that mother might respond to that. If she believed that, it's kind of saying, God let your daughter die so he could see someone else get saved. That's not a helpful message. It's not a true message. It's not something that will bring life or hope or peace. And that's what I want to talk to you about. I want to get right into that now, encourage you that you need to say things that are helpful, not things which are unhelpful. So don't get worried about saying the wrong thing. Just have the right heart to say the right thing and you'll do well. So wherever you're doing, especially in this trauma situation that we're experiencing at the moment, be a little bit careful about what you're going to say. That's what I'll talk about now. So we need to be careful that we're not just spiritualizing every situation. Not every situation. I believe that God is in control and I believe that's fine, but I think you can over-spiritualize every situation. You can make it something that it's not. You can use the scriptures like a weapon. You can give judgment, which is this whole thing about forcing them to share their feelings, or this why judgment question. Or you can do what is sometimes called silver lining. Have you heard the phrase, every cloud has a silver lining? Have you heard that phrase? It might not be something you've heard, but it means that even on a cloudy day, you should be able to see the good. Okay, I can agree with that, but not every situation needs to be polished and said, that's great, because some things are just sad. And the reality is, what's happened in Port Vila is sad. And it's all right to be sad. It's all right to acknowledge it as a traumatic experience. That's okay. There's nothing, that's not no faith, that's not something that is missing. It's actually a positive thing to say, this is hard and we're going to help you through the hard. Not, it's okay, you shouldn't be worried about it. So what do you say? What can you say? Here we go. Here's a couple of other things, just first. Some things you should really avoid. So something that we should avoid is spontaneous responses. What I mean by this is don't just say the first thing that comes into your head. Think about your response before you speak. Because as we've heard from many people, there's a list of stuff that hasn't been helpful that they have heard. So it's actually important that we stop for a minute and think. And so I'd encourage you to slow down. I'd also encourage you not to ask too many questions in a row. People, when they are struggling with trauma, can't process. Their processing capacity is diminished. There's so much going on. They have no idea. So maybe you just need to ask one question and wait for them to respond. If you're going to talk in long-winded sentences, that's not helpful. Things like personal or irrelevant questions, or telling them you don't understand what they're talking about, or I've had the same thing happen to me. A lot of us think that we've had experience, and I know I've told some stories this morning, but I want to tell you that when I'm dealing with someone who is a trauma victim, I will never tell a story about myself because it's not helpful. They don't care. They don't want me they're not really interested. They might be interested in the future about something that's happened to me, but they don't want to hear my story when they're in the midst of their story. I call this hijacking. Okay, it's like hijacking, but it's where I take over the story. Oh, that's nothing, my friend. Let me tell you my story. That doesn't help. We need to avoid that. And we also need to be careful that we're not over identifying. We're not saying the same thing happened to me or I understand how you feel. It's that sort of thing. We don't want to be saying those things because they're not helpful. And we don't want to just be making sympathy statements. So sympathy statements, I spoke about this yesterday, but the difference between sympathy and empathy. Sympathy is where you feel sorry for someone. Okay, so, I'm really sad that your house got knocked down by the earthquake. Oh, you're diminished. Your house has been knocked down. That's actually, it's socially acceptable, but it's not helpful. What is helpful is where you say something like, I heard your house has been knocked down. I can't imagine how that feels. Is there anything I can do for you? That's an empathy statement. That's helpful. But a sympathy statement is not helpful. So it's good to feel for people, but it's better to feel with people, to be with them. And also telling them what to do, or again, this forcing decisions is not helpful. All right, so when we're going to speak to the person, so we're going to talk to them, we're going to explore what we might say to them. Before we even start, I want you to answer this question: why are you even approaching them? What are you doing there? What are you trying to achieve? So if you are in a professional role, like a nurse or a first responder, you might have a professional reason you're having this conversation. If you're not in a professional context and you're just in a caring context, you have to ask yourself the question, what am I trying to get out of this communication? Because if you're truly going to be helpful, there are some things which will be unhelpful. So imagine if my motivation for having this conversation was to get them to join my church. Okay? So if my motivation, right, their house has fallen down and I see, wow, they're in need, they need assistance, so I would like to take this opportunity to see if I can talk them into becoming a Christian and joining my church. That doesn't seem like a good thing to do, does it? Doesn't seem like the right motivation. If your motivation is to prove that you are superior to them, that's not a very good motivation. We have to have a motivation that is actually valid and helpful. So what are we aiming to achieve in the conversation? A great testament, a great idea to follow is the idea of loving your neighbour as you would love yourself. And Pastor Anne talked about this scripture yesterday. That we would love one another. And in order to love one another, we have to love ourselves, but we have to also treat people in a way that they need to be treated. Maybe the conversation we're having is about emotional support or practical support or spiritual support. So we might be wanting to support them in some way, which is great. Or we might need or want to advocate for them, stand up for them and help them go through what they are facing with, the person. And it might be about being present with the person. So once you know why you're in the conversation, you can have a better conversation. And so I'm always careful about asking myself, why am I actually even having this conversation with this person who is in trauma? What is actually being experienced by them and why do I need to be aware of it? So there is a reality to the power of the fact that you are there with them. One of the powerful things that we can recognise is that there is a presence that comes with us, even if we are just a normal person walking into a room, just being with people. That is actually powerful. It's actually helpful to just be with people. And a lot of us are not comfortable with that. But I want to ask you, when we are defined in science, we are called human beings. Okay, that's what we are called. But when we actually value ourselves, we value ourselves by what we do. We are human doings. So if you ask me, tell me about yourself, Ralph, I'd tell you that I do this, I do this, I do this. And I think we have this misunderstanding that what we do is more important than what we are. My point here is, when it comes to this, people don't care what you do. They want to know that you are and that you're there in that conversation at the time. Some of the most helpful things I've ever done, and people have told me this, it was the most helpful thing you did, you sat with me. I sat with a family once in a public area where their son had tragically taken his life by suicide in his car with a weapon. And because he had taken his life with the weapon, and the police did not know what the weapon was, they could not open the car door until an expert arrived. And so the family was sitting 50 metres away, separated by the police tape, for 6 hours in the rain. And I just stood with the family for 6 hours while they waited to be able to see their son who had taken his life. I didn't do much apart from be there. But they said that was the most helpful thing anyone did for us that day, was I was just there. So you being there with your neighbours, your friends, your family, your connections is actually powerful. So it's not what you say or what you do, but how you develop who you are and what actually that means to other people. So I want to finish off my session this morning in the next 10 minutes with actually what to say. What can we say that is helpful? We talked about what not to say, and I know that's helpful, but what can you actually say to people who are in trouble? So the first thing I want to encourage you to say is nothing. Just shh. Okay? I said that to you yesterday. Just remind the person next to you, shh. Okay, that's a good thing. Just be quiet. We tend to want to talk too fast. I talk all the time. I'm a talker. That's my job. I talk. I've had to train myself to shut up. And I encourage you, quiet down. The book of Proverbs says, even a fool seems intelligent when he keeps his mouth shut. Okay, that's so I take that to myself. I say, I will seem more intelligent if I stop talking quite as much as I do. So silence is actually important. But when I speak, I choose to be tentative and sensitive. Now, I am from a tradition of church that is Pentecostal, that is not tentative, and often is not sensitive. And I have to train myself to be both of those things. I have to hold back. If anyone, you ask the team, I'm not a hesitant person. I'm a doing person. But in dealing with people, I've learned I have to be a holding back person. I have to be a little tentative. That's not being afraid. It's making them so that they can receive what they need. Because people delight in being supported. So I'm tentative, and then in every single way I can be, I try to be sensitive. I try to be sensitive to the need that they have. I try to be sensitive to the circumstance I try to be sensitive to the culture. I try to be sensitive to the experience they have. So I know that if I'm talking to anyone in Port Vila, I don't know much about your culture. I'm sorry, I don't know. I've never been here before. So it would be incredibly arrogant of me to tell you how to respond to this tragedy because I don't know your culture. So I need to be sensitive and I need to be tentative, and then I might be able to be of some help. But you need to be sensitive and tentative. Even if you know the people really, really well, it is much more attractive and it really opens up the doors. I've already mentioned the importance of empathy. Can I just encourage you, even before you speak, just imagine that if you're talking to someone whose house has collapsed, just allow yourself to think what it might feel like if your house had collapsed. Think about what it might feel like to have lost that family member or to have not had that confidence in that job or whatever it is. Just empathise with them. You can't say, I know how you feel, because you never fully know how they feel, but to engage in something so that it connects with people in a meaningful way. And a really important thing is stop trying to fix it. We can't fix everything. Now, some of you have some great skills. You might be builders, you might be people who can fix some things, and I'm not saying you can't do those things, you can, but none of us can do everything. Sometimes people just want you to be acknowledging their need. And if you acknowledge their need, that actually becomes something that is really helpful. So, these are some things that you can say. So if you're actually going to offer some help, make sure that they know who you are and make sure they know what you are capable of helping with. So even today and yesterday, we've introduced ourselves, our team, and we've said these are the things we can do. And I know the things I can do and I know the things I can't do, but I want the people I'm talking to understand that so that they have reasonable expectations of it. Now, this might seem really odd to mention this, but it's incredibly powerful to use the person's name. In a disaster, especially in an earthquake, the ground shakes, everything shakes. Nothing is certain. And one of the things that people feel is they feel disconnected to their whole world. And by using their name, or what they would normally like to be called, if it's not their first name, if it's a nickname or a family name, whatever it is that is your tradition to do, it actually causes them to be grounded. It helps them, shows them that you treat them like a person, not just a number or not just something else that you're needing to deal with. Use the person's name. This is important for me because I'm in a different culture, but it's important for each of us. I'll ask the person how they would like to be helped. One of the things I have found out about Vanuatu is that many people come from different places. So not only are there expatriates working from different countries, but you're all from different islands. You have different heritages. There's different things to being a person from this island or a person from that island, and that's all integrated. So sometimes those differences are important enough that you need to ask the person how they would like to be helped. Because, okay, their house might have fallen over, but that might not be the help that they're wanting from you at the moment. Maybe they're wanting to find some place for their family to stay tonight, but it might also be that they're just wanting to tell their story. And we need to be aware that there could be different things they're asking for. We need to give them accurate information if they have some information for them. We can offer practical help, or we can connect them to others who might be able to give them help in that area. And we also have to watch and monitor for a decline in their mental health. Now, I think later today I'm going to talk a little bit about this. I'm going to maybe talk a little bit about mental health and how a disaster impacts people's mental health. I think that might be helpful. We'll just explore that a little bit more. So, this is what I'll finish with. Some considerations before you speak. So before you talk to people, is what you're going to say going to help them? Because if it's not, how about you just don't say it? How about you just say it to yourself? Look to help people. Let's actually assist people. Will it stabilise or reduce the symptoms that they're experiencing, or will it make it worse for them? Does it provide safety and security? Does it offer them real hope? Will it be perceived as comforting? Will it help restore normalcy? Will it be a step towards God? And is it true? So these are some examples of what to say. Instead of saying the things not to say, let's remember these ones. I can't imagine how you feel. That actually validates a person and says they're feeling something that is unique to them. We're not saying it's the only person in the history of the world that's ever felt it, but we are saying, hey, what you're feeling is valid. I am so sorry this has happened. Now that's an empathy statement, that's not a sympathy statement. I care about you. I am here for you. You are important to me. You feel deeply because you love deeply. I often say that to someone who has lost someone and is weeping and experiencing pain. They're weeping because they feel it deeply, because they loved it deeply, and that's a beautiful thing. I can see or I can hear how much you cared for them. And just finishing with these two thoughts from Scripture. Romans 12 verse 15 says, rejoice with those who rejoice and weep with those who weep. 2 Corinthians 1 verse 3 said, blessed be God, the Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, the Father of mercies and the God of all comfort, who comforts us in all our tribulation, that we may be able to comfort those who are in any trouble with the comfort with which we ourselves are comforted by God. All right. Thank you so much. We are going to take our morning tea break now. So we're going to have half-hour break. I believe the food's over here. Eat up, enjoy, and we'll be coming back with Pastor Anne, and she's going to be looking more deeply at grief, loss, and trauma. Thank you very much.